Okay, we should be streaming now. So, good evening. Welcome. There we go. Streaming now. So there we are, everyone. Thank you for being here. I want to apologize to everybody for missing last week. My parents have been quite ill, and I was in a nursing home helping make arrangements with my father. He's still there. My sister's there this evening, and I spent the day with my mother in surgery, so prayers are appreciated for them. The parsha this week, as I said, it's Tazria, and it's Leviticus 12, chapter 1. And there's a couple of verses that are really, really interesting that I wanted to talk about. Most people don't see this as quite the most interesting verse in the Torah. But in actuality, there is quite a bit of interesting stuff going on. And what we want to do is take a look at, so you find the right verse here. Okay, Leviticus 12, 2 through 5. When a woman at childbirth gives birth to a male, she is unclean, she is tameh, shevat yamim, for 7 days, and she shall be tameh as at the time of her menstrual infirmity. So this is one kind of tameh that we're looking at. It's the same thing as her menstrual. Great, Troy. Glad to hear that. But if a woman gives, okay, let's finish with the boy first. On the 8th day, our boy gets circumcised, and then mom remains in a state of blood purification for 33 days. She is not to touch any consecrated item, and she is not to enter the sanctuary until this period of purification is complete. But if she gives birth to a girl, then she is tameh for 2 weeks, which is the same 2 weeks as during her menstrual period. And then she shall remain in a state of blood purification for 66 days. So we see some differences here. We see that for boys, moms have their period, their purification period for 33 days, but girls will have a mother have it for 66. What are we seeing going on here? What is the difference between giving birth to a boy and giving birth to a girl? Childbirth is childbirth is childbirth. For those of us who have experienced giving birth, there is no difference between birthing a boy or birthing a girl. Size of the baby makes a difference, but not the sex of the child. Yeah, there is a reason for the difference. What do you think could be a potential reason? What do you think might be going on? And a lot of what we see in biblical text mirrors other cultures of the period. And in the ancient world, giving birth was filled with superstitions. Let's see, there we are. In many ancient cultures, sons were expected to support parents in old age. In many of the ancient cultures, after giving birth, a mother was declared ritually unclean, tameh, for 30 days. Death in childbirth and infant mortality were two dangers that women faced then, which also continued. And during her monthly period, the woman was also ritually unclean. It was thought that she could contaminate anything she touched, including the bread, because the idea, and this idea that a woman's menstrual course caused contamination it did continue up into the 20th century, in the early days of the 20th century. Well, boys had a different, it wasn't that they were more important. Girls were equally important because, they were used to align families with marriages. Boys were the original Social Security Act. They were expected to support their parents in old age. When boys married, they brought their wives into the family household. When girls married, they left the family household and went to live in their husband's household. Although in some places of Mesopotamia, they remained in their father's household for quite some time, depending upon what age it was that they actually married. Boys are different than girls. So what is it the girls can do that boys can't? What are we looking at here? Any ideas? We women have the ability to do something that men don't. And there is a connection there. You will also notice that in this reading of Leviticus, there's no mention of going down to the mikvah and dunking for a purification ritual. It did not exist at this point in history. So let me give you a minute. See if you see what answers you can come up with that's differences. Yeah, you hit it right on the head, Troy. Girls give birth to babies. We need men to help in the process, but ultimately it's women who birth babies. In the ancient world, men didn't know men had a contributing factor. Yeah, no mikvah. No mikvah, punk. No mikvah. Didn't exist then. They knew they needed male and female, but they didn't know what the male's part was in actually giving birth and, making babies. But they knew that women delivered. Women got pregnant, women had babies. So when we see that a girl child gets a mom 66 days, what you're getting is 33 days for mom. I can't spell. Mom, and 33 days for the infant girl. It's her period as well as mom's. Because boys don't have menstrual cycles, they don't become ritually tameh for 2 weeks out of the month. And so the period of 30 to 33 days is sufficient for a male child. However, male children get circumcised. And it's ritually impure, which means, you have days that are holy and you have days that are ordinary. And God is holy. God creates humanity. God gives birth to humanity. God gives birth to the earth. God is known as El Shaddai. The word Shad being Shaddai means my breasts. So we can see God as a God of breast, which is a nurturing maternal image of God, and that shows up in our texts. And so we have that ordinary period, but then we have the Tameh period, which is considered ritually impure, but it's also considered extraordinary. It's extra holy and it's extra sacred because the birthing and the menstrual blood is what allows our species to reproduce. So we have to have that. Animals come into their cycles periodically, but that doesn't happen on a monthly basis. It's connected to the moon and reminds us of God so much. So as opposed to looking at this as ritually pure and impure, I personally prefer to look at it as ritually Tameh is extra holy, extra sacred, and ordinary is just ordinary. And we don't really have a way to translate Tameh into English. We say it's pure or impure, but that doesn't really get the concept because Hebrew can't be translated linearly. It's a conceptual based language, and therefore what we see are concepts. Like when we see shalom, we use shalom to say goodbye, shalom to say hello, or say shalom, peace, shalom aleichem, peace be unto you. But shalom really is the concept of wholeness and the entire period. So a complete set of wholeness. When we think of the word teva, it is ark, and we use a variation of that word teva for the earth. We can think of the earth as being like an ark on which humanity rides in space, just like Noah's teva, the ark, was a place in which humanity and other life forms, animals and birds and so on, lived until we were ready to repopulate the earth. Do we have any questions at this point or any comments that you would like to add? I have a glass of water here somewhere. Okay, then let's move on and take a peek at the next one. Now, if we check with Baruch Levine, who is a contemporary Bible scholar, he says about these verses that although the new mother was a source of joy to the community and her new child was a blessing, she generated anxiety. All aspects of fertility and reproduction in the ancient world generated anxiety. Childbirthing was dangerous. The mother was particularly vulnerable. The child was in danger because childbirth, they say, is the closest to death that someone can get in in our in life. And infant mortality was widespread in pre-modern societies. Multiple mothers died, and by declaring that the new mother was Tameh and extraordinary, extra holy, susceptible, the company, the community, in an essence, also sought to protect the mom and the baby. They kept people away from her. that could keep diseases away from the infants, keep diseases away from the vulnerable mom. Right, we have a grace period. Well, I haven't actually heard it called that, David. But yeah, like a lying in period, we could call it that. And yeah, lying in is usually 6 weeks to give the mom time to heal because childbirth, if you've witnessed it or you've been in the throes of childbirth, it is quite strenuous. It is quite stressful. It does really task the mom's body. And so it would make sense in the ancient world to have a laying in period. 33 days for a son because boys were healthier in essence than infant girls because infant girls were like their moms, they were women, and so they each got 33 days, but the boys only got one 33-day period. And we see a lot of concern for the welfare of the mother in the ancient times, and we see it as sometimes it shows up as fear of destructive, demonic, or anti-life forces. And it's reasonable to assume that these same anxieties were generally present among the ancient Israelites. So when we look at this chapter, chapter 12 in Leviticus, it represents and presents to us new life, but it's also a threat to that new life. So what do you think of this interpretation of Levine? As the impurity of the new mother and the different lengths of impurity for sons and daughters in ancient cultures, based on the idea that it was helping to keep the mom and the babies protected and safe from disease, sheltered, rested, so that they could, it wasn't drop the baby, get up and walk off to the field the next day and go right back to work. It just doesn't work that way. Moms need time to recover. So are there any comments on Levine's idea that the waiting period was for disease and susceptibility to infections, and it was a way to protect the mom and newborns? Any comment? Troy? David? Either of you? It's because we're prettier. No, not really. It's possible, but maybe not, because we don't really know. There's not as much written about daughters in the text as there. I see that there is a huge delay. I'm not sure why we have such a long delay tonight. What about you, Troy? Any comments? Well, while you think about that, I'll start the next comment that I have. Now, in many parts of the world today, a birth of a daughter can continue to breed both apprehension and anticipation. Sometimes because of the potential of the baby's fertility in the future, the challenges that she might face, the potential that she holds to improve her community. Now I want to share with you a text that comes from a section of a World Bank report about gender and development, because we see differences in gender here. Boys get 33 days, girls get 66. And the World Bank is talking about gender discrimination. that remains pervasive in many dimensions of life worldwide. Despite advances in gender equality in the recent decades, the nature and extent of discrimination varies considerably across countries and regions. Here, hold on just a second. Did you change that tape? Some tape in my short time. Well, taking over my short time. Sorry. Sorry for that interruption. That was my mother. She had surgery today, and I'm looking out for her. So I'll be leaving. Yeah, right after Torah study tonight. Yeah, time of healing for mom and baby. And so you kind of agree with Baruch Levine then, Troy, because that's how Levine sees this, that it's a time of healing for the mom and the babies. Okay, nature and extent of discrimination against women varies considerably across various countries and regions, but there are striking patterns. There is no region of the developing world in which women are equal to men in legal, social, and economic rights. Gender gaps are widespread in access to and control of all resources, economic opportunities, power, and political voice. Women and girls bear the largest and most direct costs of these inequalities, but the costs cut more broadly across society and ultimately harms everyone. So if we had to look, no, no, she just had a question. If I have to go early, I'll let you know. So, which is why I don't have videos this evening. I didn't come in early and get all that stuff ready for her and everything like that. I just came in when it's time for class. So if we look at the gender equalities and inequalities in this text, do we see gender discrimination? And I'll pass your words on to her that you guys are sending love and prayers. So do we see gender discrimination in the text where mom rests 33 days with a boy but 66 days with a girl? How would you view that? But do you, in this particular situation, in the laying in period, are we seeing gender discrimination in regards to this specific situation of laying in for women with baby boys and for women with baby girls? Would you personally consider the differences in the lying in period to be discriminatory? What are your thoughts on that? Okay, yeah, boys are usually tougher. Now, you haven't met some of my girls. Well, actually, you haven't met any of the four of my girls. They can be as tough as their brothers, every single one of them. But the difference in the lying in period, from personal experience, I would want the longer lying in period. So 6 weeks are 36 days, regardless of boy or girl. Okay, so neither one of you see this to be a discriminatory text against infant girls. You're not looking at it from that perspective. Now, this text, how does this particular text help you think about the apprehension and anticipation that might surround the birth of a girl? And when this text in Leviticus was written in this particular period, they had no way of knowing whether the baby coming was a boy, a girl. Sometimes you knew if you were having twins or more. Sometimes you didn't. My aunt didn't know she was having twins. She just thought she was getting a 9-pound baby or a big 8-pound baby. But they were back to back and couldn't be determined, and she got 2 for the price of 1. Yeah. So if you thought you were getting a girl, or if a girl was born, would a girl bring the birth of a girl? Okay, you guys are the guys. So if your wife in this time period, put yourself back in Mesopotamia, put yourself back in the period which we're talking about in, biblical days, if your wife gave birth to a daughter, what kind of anxiety and apprehension might you feel over the birth of a daughter as opposed to a birth of a son? Would you feel more anxiety? And if so, what kind? Yeah, boys were honored in most cultures. They still are. Look at the Chinese culture, for example. Well, yeah, I would be concerned today with her dating. We make jokes about that we're going to lock our daughters up today. And time to clean the AR-15. My first boyfriend came to pick me up, and there my dad was sitting on the living room floor with his guns, all taken apart, going, I'm cleaning the guns. Scared the dickens out of the poor boy. Maybe they'll come back if we're lucky. Maybe they won't if Dad's lucky. So we see an apprehension of that. But in the ancient world, girls didn't date. In the ancient world, fathers just married them off. So what kind of anxieties or apprehensions might you feel in the ancient world? They didn't have AR-15s. And we know parents arranged marriages. Think about Rachel. Think about the donkey. Eleazar, and he took that donkey and those camels. He took Ed and went wife hunting. That's going to be you. Okay. Okay. She'll find a good hubby. And whose job is it to find her that husband? Right. And Troy says, I think that as a father, I'd be worried about continuing my family because it was thought that only through the boys. Right. And the boys would bring wives into the household, and so they would become the new daughters. Right. How about the story of Dinah and Shechem, and how the brother posse went out and ruled and fixed her life? Yeah, thinking back then. That's what I'm asking. If you are thinking in that time period. You know, Dinah thought she was going to get a husband, and her brothers took control, and they killed him and numerous other men and made their father very unhappy. They took control. So we don't see a lot of power with the daughter. The daughter is, yeah, well, that's what her brothers did. They went out and got that guy, plus a bunch more. I'd have to look it up. It's in Genesis. And Dinah is one of Jacob's sons. Yep, Levi and Simeon. Yep, the brother posse strikes again. My girls have named their brothers the brother posse for that exact same reason, because if they want to date, the brother posse chases them down and checks them out. They want to get married, the brother posse goes after the potential husband, checks them out and threatens them with bodily injury and harm if he hurts their sister. So you have to be more protective. Yeah. Fathers then were more protective of their daughters. They had to be more protective of her virginity, which is why they might have married their daughters off at such young ages, even if the marriage wasn't consummated until the child. Okay, okay, David, we see that the guy would have disappeared. Yeah, something would have happened. We once dug a trench in our front yard. We were putting in a curb, and a boyfriend came by and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm digging a grave to bury old boyfriends in." Sad to say, I should have buried that one. Turned out he was not a keeper. He should have been buried in the trench. But we're off topic here. So daughters would have caused apprehension because they would have needed more protection than their brothers would have. Because the guys could go out, they could go out and do the boy things and what have you, but the daughter's going to hang around. You've got to provide for her education. What else did you have to provide for a daughter in that time period? Before you could marry her off, she needed something. What did she need? And it's an obligation to Jewish communities today to provide this same item for a bride. What did brides have to have then? A dowry, correct, Troy. They needed to have a dowry. Today, in modern American society, brides still receive a dowry when they first leave their father's home and go into a new marriage. Today, we call it a bridal shower. And that's the dowry that the bride brings with her into the family. That's why husbands don't have husband showers. They don't have a groom shower where they go down to Lowe's and buy new tools and stuff, because guys are their thing and women bring stuff into a marriage. So a father would have had to provide a dowry. Think of poor Jethro with all those daughters. Think of poor Tavia with all those daughters and a responsibility to provide every daughter a good marriage. So there was a lot of apprehension. That's it. You didn't even offer a camel. You left Ed. You should have offered Ed. Yep, should have taken Ed with you. Tracy's father might have been thoroughly impressed with Ed. So I guess, yeah, see, Troy agrees. You should have offered him Ed. I'm not so sure I'd take 7 goats for one of my girls. Yeah, I want a little more. I want a bride price. I want to know what this groom is going to pay me in recompense because I'm losing my daughter, which means I'm losing my ice. Silly question, David. Where do you find a camel? In the desert. I know where to find camels. Go to Mesopotamia. Go to Baghdad. Troy says at the camel store. You can also check the zoo. Zoos often have camels. You might be able to get one really cheap. And the camel market. Check eBay. See if there are eBay camels for sale on eBay. You never know what you might find there. And there they are, camels. What do you get for a camel on eBay? Oh, well. Here you go. Turkish and domestic blend cigarettes. Camel cigarettes. Think Tracy's father would be up for camel cigarettes? I'm not sure. And a camel handbag. There you go. Tracy might like that. But all I'm seeing right now, camel leather purse, camel sticker poker chips, a pyramid candle. Okay, that's not a camel. So there you go. So, okay, you're not going to find camels on eBay unless you're looking for camel cigarettes. So, I am sorry. Sorry to disappoint you, but you're out of luck. Okay. Looks like flying a camel to Alabama. Last I knew, camels don't fly, smokes won't go over. So what is halacha for asking for her hand nowadays? Nowadays, the amount you need to have for the ketubah is, according to the cost of living index, you have to be able to provide the bride with enough jewelry that if you were to get a divorce, she would be able to live off of it for 1 year. So if it costs $35,000 for her to maintain her standard of living for 1 year, that rock on her hand or collection of rocks better be worth at least $35,000. And then you have to draw up the ketubah. And then there's some ceremony with the mothers about breaking plates and something to do with getting the contract signed and the ketubah signed at the wedding. And it's written in Zuzim because the contract is written in Aramaic, and it gets read at the wedding. Okay. Now, if her standard of living costs her $100,000 a year, then the jewelry has to equal $100,000. So it's whatever it costs for her, and that's going to be different. If you want, I can look that up in my rabbi's manual. Yes, yes. And she would get paid before anything else. That would be her share of the divorce settlement, minimum. And the alimony is also set to the cost of living index. So if you are sure that Tracy's the one, you're going to have to come across with silver and gold and real jewels. Now, the reason the wedding rings are plain gold bands and not stones is you can never be sure that a stone at a wedding is real. By looking at it, you can't tell if it's real diamonds or real cubic zirconia. But when you look at a gold ring and you take a bite out of that gold ring, you know that gold ring is a real ring. And so that's why there are no stones in the wedding ring itself. And then you have to be able to do circles without getting dizzy because there are 7 hakafot, 7 circles in the wedding ceremony. And the rabbi comes. It could, but it would have to be earmarked to stay for the bride, yes. Because if something happens to the groom, whether by divorce or death, you do. If you get a get, would you also have to do a civil government divorce? I can't answer that for you. I think that depends on the state. And usually what you do is you get a civil divorce, just a regular divorce through the court system, but you get the get in order. But in order to have a religious divorce, you would have to have a get. Okay, well, you got a $35,000 necklace hanging around or more? Tracy's one lucky woman. It shows you the value. Yeah. Women are really valued in marriage, but they're vulnerable and they need extra protection and they need extra care. And I disagree with the idea that this particular text shows discrimination to a woman because the laying in period for a daughter is longer than it is for a boy. I think it should be longer for both of them, quite frankly. And because moms need that bonding time and babies need that bonding time. And especially, nursing babies, sometimes it takes a while to get that baby to latch on just right. And you don't need the stress of visitors and guests. You just need your mom and your husband. And so I do not view this as a discriminatory passage. I view this as a passage of compassion, in consideration, and honoring of women with a laying in period, and the fact that the daughter gets a longer laying in period honors her femininity as well because she is also. Yeah. And David says that they need the time. I know I was the mom for the first 2 months with Hunter. Yeah, moms and babies and dads We need that time to bond with our family. Moms have been bonding while the baby's in the womb because mom and baby are intimately connected in a way that a dad can't be intimately connected to a child, which gives also the idea that as Tameh being ritually impure, Tameh is being like extraordinary, beyond ordinary, sacred, and a holy time because this is when mom is in the image of God, of giving birth, of reproducing the species, and it's something men can't do. We can't do it without men, but this is a job for the moms to do. And mom cycles are in cycle with the moon, which is the lesser light of the two great lights in the sky, the two great luminaries. But it doesn't mean mom is less, and it doesn't mean the infant girl is less than the infant boy. So we have 10 minutes left. Right. Yep. If the mom isn't there, the bonding is between baby and father, and that is an intimate bonding. It's not the same as the kind that the mom bonds with the baby in the womb, but it is an extremely important bonding. And ties parents into their children. Yeah, it's when you fall in love with your child so that when they become teenagers and they become wild animals, you don't feel like strangling them. Well, you might feel like choking them, but you refrain from doing so because you remember, oh yeah, I love this child. I've loved this child since it was a baby. So we do our put another nickel in that little push tin. Hit that little donate button right up there above at the top of the page. We invite you to put a minimum of $5 in there. If you have more, please feel free to put more. If you have less, please feel free to have less. The hardest thing for you being a mom. Yeah, Mr. Mom, but you figured it out. Okay, well, good. Congratulations. I can see the longer time where girls are more important, they need more care. Yeah, they're more vulnerable. They need more care, they need more protection than their brothers do. Brothers can go out in the field and go hunting. They can go out looking for caves, go out for rocks, go out and do boy stuff, pee on the bushes and the trees and things, Girls stay home. Well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it, David. Sometimes it's hard to find something in a reading that's a difficult reading like this because we are so far removed from this organic world that we really have to shift our thought process and put ourselves back into another world by doing some exploration of what was like that. That's okay, I understand. So we'll say a Misha Barak. Misha Barak Avotenu Laimoten. I can't remember the words. May the source of blessing be in our lives this evening as we pray for each other, as we pray for healing, and let us say with these made up words, Amen. Amen. Oh, Cirrus. Cirrus. That's something that's also very intriguing in this particular Parsha reading is the fact it wasn't a doctor. Leprosy was considered a disease in religion. Right, the priests were like the doctors because religion was part of everyday life. And whereas today we see religion as something separate because we have our day life, we have our work life, we have our Sunday go to beach, Shabbat service. Thank you, David, I will. And priests were doctors because it was all wrapped up in one. And it's a very fascinating way to see society that we see results based on our behavior and religion. So yeah, it's fascinating, Troy. But I'm going to go and check in with my mom, see how she's doing. So Lila Tov to everybody. Right, right. Religion wasn't separate. We didn't. The separation of religion from work and separation of church and state, all these are Western ideas that came out of the Hellenistic world. Um, the Jewish ideal is it's all together. So I'm going to let you go, and I will see you next week. Lila Tov.